Shitposting will be a 21st century phenomenon of creating intentionally terrible and offensive content for the explicit purpose of baiting a reaction. Now, you would be forgiven for thinking this has no historical precedent, but a century ago, a raucous group of artists from the Dada movement are doing just that. And in February 1922, the entire Parisian art world gathers to watch two of its leaders battle it out in a mock trial. And it's not just the Dadaists who are making waves in the winter of 1922. The weird and wonderful art of the interwar years is exploding everywhere. This is Between Two Wars Season 2, a chronological summary of the interwar years, where we cover the zeitgeist, the culture, the technology, the art, the sports, the science, and much more in the era when, for better or for worse, humanity ushered in modern times. I'm Indy Neidell. With varying levels of success, the great powers are continuing to hammer out the specifics of the post-war order. The Washington Naval Conference concludes with never-before-seen agreements on naval disarmament. British, Belgian, and French representatives meet in Cannes to discuss Germany's inability to pay war reparations, and the Allied powers propose an armistice to try and finally end the Greco-Turkish War. Tension is also growing in Ireland, where many Republicans are outraged at the provisional government's concession to govern the country as a dominion of the British Empire. And there is tension in another part of the British Empire as Mahatma Gandhi is imprisoned on sedition charges for his non-cooperation campaign against imperial rule in India. Despite being around for a while now, the modern world continues to amaze, shock, and frighten the people living in it, so it's only natural that artists offer equally fantastical interpretations of what they see. One of the most famous for doing so is Pablo Picasso. Born in Malaga in Spain in 1881, Picasso demonstrated his artistic talent from a young age. At only 18, he had his first solo exhibition in the iconic Barcelona cafe Els Quatre Gats, and it wasn't long before Picasso began producing exciting new contributions to the art world. Chief among them is Cubism, widely considered one of the most important artistic developments of the past few centuries. Seemingly abstract, it is supposed to be a new and purer way of depicting reality. Most Western art since the Renaissance offers the viewer one specific moment captured from one specific angle. But that's not how vision actually works. Most of the time when you see an object, you can walk around it, you can watch it move, you can view it from multiple angles. It's 3D. Cubism aims to replicate that on a single 2D canvas, breaking its subjects down into geometric shapes and reconstructing them as if each one was seen from a different perspective. Funnily enough, one of the works often most closely associated with the Cubist movement is not actually purely Cubist. Painted in 1907, Les Demoiselles d'Avignon is more accurately described as proto-Cubist, but it is still one of Picasso's most famous works, though its initial reception was nowhere near as warm as its future praise. It was seen only by a select few of Picasso's associates, and many of them found it pretty distasteful. Even Cubism's co-creator, Georges Braque, was shocked when he first saw it, saying that it was like drinking petrol. It is certainly abrasive. It depicts 5 naked prostitutes in a Barcelona brothel, staring menacingly out of the frame, and all drawn in a seemingly inconsistent manner, with jagged faces and abstract limbs. Even when Les Demoiselles was displayed publicly for the first time a decade later in 1916, it drew criticism as immoral and ugly. However, it has come by now, the winter of 1922, to be seen as a hugely innovative work, pushing all the boundaries of what art is while still being anchored in the tradition of greats like Raphael or Michelangelo. One of the men responsible for this is French writer André Breton. He's one of the few people to admire the work from the moment he saw it, and in 1924, he will be responsible for the revolutionary Les Demoiselles appearing in print for the first time in his own art journal. But Breton is no stranger to controversy himself, and on February 17, 1922, he is the defendant at a mock trial that will change the whole course of modern art. Held at the restaurant and café La Closerie des Lilas, Picasso himself is in attendance along with the elite of the Parisian art world. It is the latest episode in an unfolding rivalry between Breton and fellow writer Tristan Tzara, a leader of the Dada movement. Tensions are running extremely high. An American journalist witnessing the trial writes, "Never in my experience were words of such passion and flame hurled at each other by men without coming to blows. If they had been Americans, they would have butchered one another." Okay, a bit of context is needed here. Founded in Zurich in 1916 and flourishing particularly in Paris, the Dada movement was born out of a horror of the tragedy and brutality of the Great War and the desire to reject every value associated with it. Its adherents work in every artistic medium, from poetry to painting to performance, music, and more. And it's more of an idea than any one style. If Cubism intends to be a new way to depict reality, then Dada intends to smash reality itself. As Tzara said himself in his Dada Manifesto of 1918, "I write a manifesto, and I want nothing. Yet I say certain things, and in principle I am against manifestos, as I am also against principles. I write this manifesto to show that people can perform contrary actions together while taking one fresh gulp of air. I am against action, for continuous contradiction, for affirmation too. I am neither for nor against, and I do not explain because I hate common sense." Okay. Astrid just left. It is funny. And it doesn't make much sense, hardly at all. But that's the whole point. See, Dada mocks the idea of tradition and art and rational thought itself. Take a 1919 work by Marcel Duchamp. It's a cheap postcard reproduction of Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa, right? On it, Duchamp has drawn a mustache and beard while writing LHOOQ, those letters, beneath as a title. Now, if you say those like in French, then those letters sound like Elle est chaud au cul, which directly translates to "she is hot in the ass." I don't think I really need to explain the statement being made here, okay? But love it or hate it, Dada's influence is immense, throwing out the rule book on everything art and the artist can be. The only problem is that already now in 1922, some believe that it has stagnated, and André Breton is chief among them. Though active in the movement, he believes Dada is losing its revolutionary potential and becoming reactionary itself. For Breton, its meaninglessness is too meaningless. It has no program or focus and is unsustainable. His first attempt to draw attention to this was in May 1921, when he presided over a mock trial himself. The defendant, tried in absentia and represented by a mannequin, was Maurice Barré, a formerly radical novelist who had become an arch-conservative politician associated with the likes of Action Française, the far-right monarchist political movement. Breton organized the trial to show that revolutionary thought can quickly become reactionary and must be promptly swept away for a new vanguard to emerge, while also conveniently placing himself as the man to do so. It seems like Tzara cottoned on to this ruse, however, because when he was called to the witness stand by Breton, he denounced the entire trial, calling everyone there a bastard. He declared he had no faith in justice, even if it was Dada justice, then sang a nonsensical song that went, "Drink bird milk, wash your chocolates, Dada, Dada, beef," and stormed out of the theater. Tzara's dramatic exit sets the rivalry with Breton, and it is this winter that it all boils over. On January 3rd, Breton announces the creation of an international congress for the determination and defense of the modern spirit that will meet in March to determine which artistic movements should be left in the past. Tzara is invited, but publishes an open letter denouncing it. Breton takes it as a personal attack, and on February 7th, publishes an open letter of his own, where he directly denounces a person known as the promoter of a movement that comes from Zurich, who it is pointless to name more specifically, and who no longer corresponds to any current reality. But Breton has overplayed his hand, and the wider artistic community is furious. Breton sounds awfully xenophobic here, somewhat ironically echoing the rhetoric of men like Barrès. Breton's fellow Congress committee members suspend the event and instead announced that a hearing must be held at La Closerie on February 17th. Hundreds gather for the trial, and the split in the Dada movement is clear for all to see. Breton tries to present his case with a dignified intellectualism, but is again made a fool of by Zara, who screams his accusations with utmost drama, whipping up the jeering crowd. It all ends in disaster for Breton. The jury declare a vote of no confidence and cancels his Congress from taking place. He is left in disgrace, but it is Breton who will have the last laugh. With his split with the Dada movement now obvious, he can tell anyone who will listen that the movement is dead. By sheer force of will, he will make this reality, gathering followers together for the next major artistic movement of the interwar era, Surrealism. It will be a complete success. By the end of the decade, he will have published the Surrealist Manifesto, claimed Picasso as one of his own, and seen his old enemy Zara give in and join the new movement. It's not just highbrow Parisians enjoying the drama of modern art. It's exploding everywhere. Modernism hits Brazil this winter with the Semana de Arte Moderna festival running in Sao Paulo from February 10th to 17th. Taking place in the centenary year of Brazilian independence, its organizers hope to shock their country out of what they consider to be cultural conservatism and create a distinctly Brazilian artistic identity, fusing European and North American movements like Expressionism and Cubism with influences from indigenous and African culture. It's also incredibly divisive. One man attacks a painting with a walking cane, others throw ripened fruit at stage performers, and the artistic establishment is outraged. Still, it brings modern art to national attention in Brazil and kickstarts a vibrant movement in Sao Paulo. Another landmark in modern art comes this March with the German expressionist film Nosferatu, eine Symphonie des Grauens in Berlin. Directed by F.W. Murnau and starring Max Schreck as Count Orlok, it is an unauthorized adaptation of Bram Stoker's 1897 novel Dracula. But while in the original story, the evil Count Dracula moves from Transylvania to England and terrorizes the population there, Count Orlok moves to a small town in Germany. Expressionism has already come up in this series. I spoke about Dr. Caligari's release 2 years ago. It's not as easy to define as Cubism or Dadaism, often overlapping with those and other modern art movements. But generally speaking, it's a form that prioritizes subjective inner feelings over external reality, with jarring shapes and colors, primitive imagery, and warped perspectives. Dr. Caligari achieved this with disorienting set design and dramatic acting. Nosferatu, by contrast, does it with cinematography. The makeup is convincing, and so are the special effects, but the camera work, and the lighting, and the editing create this eerie, unnatural tone throughout the film. The most iconic scene depicts the shadow of Count Orlok ascending a flight of stairs with his clawed hands outstretched, hoping to feast on his intended victim in the room above. Nosferatu is lauded by its critics upon its release and will continue to be praised for the rest of the century. One final modernist landmark I'm going to talk about this season comes out of Ireland in February. It's James Joyce's novel Ulysses, and it will be widely regarded not only as one of the greatest works of modernist literature, but one of the greatest in the English language, as well as one of the most difficult to read. It chronicles one day, June 16, 1904, in Dublin, and its protagonist Leopold Bloom's various encounters. It is written mainly as stream of consciousness, following the many thoughts and feelings that go through a character's head. But it also jumps between numerous styles, from translated early Latin to sing-song rhymes, to the journalistic style of a newspaper. Upon publication, Ulysses is immediately praised as a modernist landmark in English literature. Fellow writer T.S. Eliot declares it to be the most important expression which the present age has found. Others won't be so enthusiastic. Virginia Woolf will only get about 200 pages in before giving up, subsequently writing in her diary, "An illiterate, underbred book, it seems to me. The book of a self-taught working man." And we all know how distressing they are. And that was the weird, wacky, and wonderful art that is exploding in and around the winter of 1922. Of course, There's a lot more going on in the world this winter than just art. The first ever insulin injection for the treatment of diabetes is administered. Famed Arctic and Antarctic explorer Ernest Shackleton dies on his final expedition. And political change, both liberating and oppressive, is sweeping the world. In fact, change is everywhere in the interwar years, something you should have hopefully realized if you've been watching this series. Love it or hate it, modern art is a means to understand this all. It's confusing, sometimes ugly, and apparently unmoored from any sense of reality. But so are most things in this era. As time goes on, life will only get more surreal, and art will follow along to interpret it. The Nazis have a pretty strange relationship to art. Something I'll probably talk about later in this series. Still, if you want to learn more about that now, then you can watch our World War II video on Nazi looting. You can click on that right here whenever it comes up, which will be fairly soon. And if you enjoyed the oddball art in this episode, then you probably enjoyed my oddball ties. And have you ever felt like owning one yourself? Well, if so, you can head on over to Indy's Tie Barn and you can bid on this and the many other ties that I wear in all of our productions. Links are probably popping up now. Our Time Ghost Army member of the week is Parker Rhodes. It is the Time Ghost Army that finances all our content, making this entire project possible. So be like Parker and join the Time Ghost Army, patreon.com or timeghost.tv. Marcel Duchamp, the Dadaist, who I mentioned earlier, he once wrote, "I have forced myself to contradict myself in order to avoid conforming to my own taste." Oh, I'm not going to have the toast, but that reminded me of another Marcel, completely unrelated. Here's a poem from George Carlin's from the 1970s, okay? The party was ruined when Marcel Marceau won 83 games of charades in a row. Cheers. We remember you, George. There we go.